When we want to visualize a relation and think about what it represents, we will often think of a relation in terms of its graph. What does it mean to have the graph of a relation? Well, it's just a picture of all of the ordered pairs in the relation in the xy plane. We think of the domain as represented on the x-axis and the range as represented on the y-axis. And so every pair in the relation is a pair xy, just the way that we usually write ordered pairs. So if we have the relation R that consists of these pairs, we can represent each pair with a dot on the graph. So 2, 4, -3, 5, -4, 0, 1, -1, and 0, -2. So these are just points in the xy plane. And that collection of all of those points represents the relation R. We can also go the other way, given the graph. If it's a graph of just a list of points, we can just list the relation. So here we have 0, 1, 0, 0, -2, 0, -2, -3, and 1, -1. So if this graph represents a relation S, then S consists of the pairs 0, 1, 0, 0, -2, 0, -2, -3, and 1, -1. Okay, part of the reason that graphs are especially interesting is that we can use a graph to show a relation which contains infinitely many points. So we don't need to just list off 5 or 6 or 3 or 4 or just a few points. We can think about, just like we could think about sets that contained infinitely many points, we can think of relations that contain infinitely many points. So here's an example of a graph of a relation. And we notice that in this graph, there are infinitely many points plotted, right? Like everywhere along one of these lines, that's a point on the graph. So I could pick, for example, this point right here, -2, 1. That's a point on the graph. So that tells me -2 is related to 1. I could pick this point right here. Notice the filled in dot means that -4, -1 is a point on the graph. So -4, -1. -4 is related to -1. Now, this point here, the empty dot indicates a point that is not on the graph. So that empty dot is showing me that the pair 5, 0 is not an element of the relation T. So I could not write 5 is related to 0. But I could pick points that are close by. So I could pick like a point like this, which is maybe like 4.5 something. It's hard to tell exactly what the y-coordinate of that point is, so I'm not going to choose that point. But that point does represent a pair that's in the relation. And then maybe I can pick 3, -1. So 3 is related to -1. And So we think again of these statements about two numbers being related as being statements, so they can be true or false. So -1, t2, that's saying that the pair -1, 2 is in the relation. Now here's -1, 2, and we see there's a filled in dot there. So that is in the relation, that's true. -1, 1, that's this point here. Again, we see the filled in dot, so that's also true. -1, -1, oh, there's nothing there. There's no mark at all on the graph. So -1, -1 is not in the relation. That's false. And then -1, -3, there's an empty dot there. So -1, -3 is not in the relation. That's also false.